Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We are diving into a super relevant topic today. The lines between public and private spaces in our digital world.
Yeah.
We found this article that really digs into how, technology is changing what we think about privacy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it used to be so simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like parks, cafes, that was all public.
Totally.
But in your home or a private club, that was private.
Right.
But now with all these cameras and all this digital sharing going on, it's getting a lot more messy.
Well, and it's not even just about that kind of like self-conscious feeling like, oh, someone's going to get a bad picture of me.
Right.
It's like technology is really changing, like what even is private anymore.
That's a great point. And this article, it really emphasizes that this isn't something like way off in the future.
Mm-hmm.
This is happening right now.
Yeah.
We've all seen those 360 photos on social media, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like the whole environment in one shot. So you might think, oh, I'm having this private moment at a club, but then boom, you're in this public panorama that anyone can see.
Exactly. And, the article brings up this really interesting example. This Hawk-Tuah girl, did you see that?
Oh, yeah.
This woman who was like just caught in some random street video that like blew up. And it wasn't like she was, trying to be famous or anything. She was just going about her day.
You're like living her life.
And then all of a sudden she was like thrust into the public eye. And I think that really shows how technology can like totally ignore our expectations of privacy.
Yeah, and it's like anyone with a smartphone now, like they could accidentally turn someone else's private moment into like a public thing.
Right.
And, the article points out that with these AR glasses becoming more and more common, all this recording, it's only going to increase.
Yeah, and it's important to remember it's not just about pictures or videos, It's about collecting data on a massive scale.
Oh, you mean like facial recognition? I mean, I remember when Google Glass came out, everyone was like freaking out about the privacy problems.
Yeah, totally.
But now we have like Meta and Apple pushing the limits even more.
Exactly. And these new AR glasses, they've got these cameras, right, that are constantly recording everything.
Right.
And then on top of that, they add AI-powered facial recognition.
Oh, wow.
And now you can, like, pick out specific people in a crowd,
wow,
track where they're going, and potentially even link, like, their conversations to them.
It's not just about being seen.
Yeah.
It's about being, like, analyzed.
Exactly.
It's like the article talks about how it's becoming harder and harder to be anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we leave a digital trail everywhere, whether we want to or not.
The article really, really highlights this point, and it makes you think, like, how does this impact, like, our sense of freedom,
Yeah.
Like, knowing you're constantly being watched and analyzed. It could make you act differently.
Right.
Like, you might not speak as freely,
Might not be yourself.
Exactly. And even just, like, being in public and blending in, It's hard to enjoy that when you feel like you're being scrutinized.
Yeah.
It's a subtle shift, but it really changes the power dynamic between individuals and those who have access to all this data.
It's true. It's like we're kind of like sleepwalking into this whole new reality. I mean, remember all the drama around Google Glass?
Yeah.
And now these AR glasses, they're like marketed as this cool, trendy thing.
Yeah.
And it feels like people are pushing back less.
And that's, I think, a really crucial observation. The article does a really good job of highlighting this point, this like normalization of surveillance.
Right.
It's like the most concerning part of all of this. We get so used to being recorded all the time that we start to think it's like inevitable
Right.
or even good.
Right. Like we need it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's when we're really in danger of losing something precious, our privacy, our anonymity, just the ability to like be in public without feeling like we're under a microscope.
Yeah. It's almost like we're trading our privacy for convenience.
Right.
And for entertainment.
Yeah.
But we're not really thinking about what will happen in the long run.
Exactly. And that's exactly what the article is saying. We need to wake up and have a real talk about how we want to live in this super digital, super connected world. The authors are like really strong on this point that we can't just like sit back and watch this happen.
Right.
We have to be part of it. We have to demand more transparency from companies. We have to push for stronger privacy laws, and we have to educate ourselves about all of this.
So are you saying we should all just like ditch our smartphones and disappear?
No. That's not what they're saying.
Okay.
It's not about rejecting technology completely.
Gotcha.
It's about like being intentional about it.
Right.
Making smart choices.
Right.
Making sure it works for us, not the other way around.
So it's like finding that balance.
Right.
enjoying the good stuff technology brings, but also protecting our privacy and, like, our independence.
Absolutely. And the article seems to be saying that it all starts with knowing how technology is blurring the lines between, what used to be public and what used to be private. Yeah, once we understand the problem, then we can start figuring out what to do about it. And we can start taking back control of our privacy in this, constantly evolving digital world.
And here's where it gets super interesting. The article doesn't just talk about cameras in public. It goes into how this, like, blurring of lines is happening in our homes, too.
Yeah.
The place we've always thought of as, like, the ultimate private space.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
We fill our homes with all these smart devices, security systems,
Right.
even appliances with cameras and microphones.
Right.
All for, convenience and safety.
Yeah.
But then we end up inviting this constant surveillance into the most private parts of our lives. And it's almost like, we've become desensitized to cameras being everywhere in public that we just automatically accept them in our homes now too. And what the article really drives home is it's not even just our own devices we got to worry about.
Oh, you mean like when you have friends over?
Exactly. Think about it. Your friend comes over, they're wearing their new AR glasses, or maybe they've got one of those fitness trackers that's always collecting data.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, your home, your safe space, it's being recorded by somebody else's tech.
That's a really good point. The article actually talks about how this adds up a whole other level of complexity to the whole privacy thing. It's not just like Big Brother watching us.
Right.
It's like everybody's watching everybody else.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so tricky. We tend to focus on the threats from, governments, big corporations,
Right.
But we forget about the smaller ways that our friends and family, even just people we know, might be part of eroding this privacy.
Yeah. It's like we're all walking around as mini surveillance hubs.
Right.
And we don't even realize it. And the scariest part is that most people don't even get the implications of it all.
Yeah.
They just see the convenience, the coolness, the social part of it all, but they don't see what it could mean for their privacy.
That's such a key point that the article brings up. This shift is happening so fast that it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of it all,
Right.
And we kind of miss those potential downsides. It's like we're all sleepwalking into this future where privacy is harder and harder to hold on to.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, though. Who has time to read all those privacy policies?
Right.
And tweak every setting on every device?
Right.
It's too much.
Totally. And that's why the authors are really calling for this big conversation about privacy in the digital age.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying we need to make privacy a bigger part of the conversation when we talk about all this new tech. We need to educate ourselves about the risks, demand more transparency from companies, and push for tougher privacy rules.
Okay, so what can we actually do? I mean, in a world where cameras and data collection are everywhere,
Yeah.
is there even a way to put the genie back in the bottle at this point?
The authors seem to think it's not about getting rid of technology entirely, but about using it more mindfully.
Okay.
It's about making informed choices and setting some boundaries.
Being aware,
Yes.
being intentional,
Right.
taking back control of how we use this tech. So what kind of steps can we take, specifically?
Well, the article suggests a few things. We can start by being more careful about what we share online.
Okay.
And choose our devices more carefully.
Okay.
And, actually taking the time to understand the privacy settings on our devices and change them to what we're comfortable with.
Those are good individual steps, but what about bigger changes? What needs to happen so that privacy doesn't just vanish in all this progress?
The authors argue that we need to tackle this on a few levels.
Okay.
First, more transparency from tech companies about how they're collecting our data and what they're doing with it.
That is so important. I'm so over these vague privacy policies that nobody understands. We need radical transparency.
Yeah.
Where companies just tell us straight up, what they're collecting, how they're using it, and who they're sharing it with.
Exactly. And then on top of transparency, we need stronger privacy laws.
Okay.
Laws that give people control over their data, that
great.
give us the right to see our data, delete it, and correct it. And laws that hold companies accountable when they mess up and expose our data.
That makes a lot of sense. But even with all that, isn't it going to be hard to change the culture? It feels like we've gotten so used to sharing everything online that privacy is almost old-fashioned.
You've hit the nail on the head. The authors really emphasize that. The most important thing is creating this culture where we value privacy.
Oh.
We need to educate people about their rights. We need to show them how to protect their information. And we need to make it clear that privacy isn't something we should just give up for progress.
It sounds like a huge task.
Yeah.
But the article makes a really convincing case that this isn't just about, like, our own little privacy bubbles.
Right.
It's about protecting the whole idea of a free and open society.
Exactly. The authors argue that privacy is, like, a basic human right. It's essential for freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of association. It's about making sure that technology works for us, not the other way around.
So it's bigger than just someone seeing that embarrassing photo from last weekend's party.
So much bigger. It's about protecting our autonomy, our freedom, our right to just exist in the world without feeling like we're under constant surveillance and judgment.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. The blurring lines between public and private spaces, the rise of constant surveillance, what this all means for our privacy, and what we need to do about it.
Yeah, it's a complex issue, but it's one that's really crucial to understand and, engage with. And the authors of this article, they do a great job of explaining the problems and the possible solutions in a really clear and interesting way.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into this, this world where the lines are getting blurry, what's the main takeaway for you? What do the authors really want us to get?
I think it's the sense of urgency. They're really saying, hey, we can't just sit back and let our privacy disappear.
Right.
We got to be aware of the risks. We got to make smart choices about the tech we use.
Right.
And we got to actively push for change.
It's interesting because we've been talking about this as like a technology problem.
Yeah.
But it's really, like you said before, it's a human problem.
Yeah.
It's about how we, as like a society, figure out how to deal with all this.
Absolutely. And the authors make that point really well. Technology is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
Right.
It's up to us to decide how it gets used, to make sure it helps humanity, not, hurts it.
Okay, that makes sense. But like, how do we actually do that? Where do we even start with something this big and complicated?
The authors have a few ideas.
Okay.
One is education. We got to learn about the technology we're using, understand what it could mean for our privacy.
Right.
And know how to protect our own information.
But it can't just be about, like, each person learning on their own, right?
Right.
How do we get this conversation happening on a bigger scale?
You're absolutely right. They say we got to talk to our families, our friends, our communities about this. We need to make privacy part of our everyday conversations.
Okay.
Not just something we think about when there's, like, a big data breach on the news.
So it's about making people more aware, changing the culture, making these conversations normal. And what about demanding change from, like, the people in charge?
Yes.
The article talked a lot about needing stronger laws.
Yeah, they were really clear about that. Individual action is important, but it's not enough. We got to hold our governments and the companies we use accountable. They have to make privacy a priority, not just something they tack on at the end.
It all seems kind of overwhelming, honestly.
Yeah.
But the article makes a strong point. Privacy isn't just some, like, abstract idea.
Right.
It's the foundation of a free and open society.
Exactly. And that's why the authors are so passionate about this. They think if we lose our privacy, we risk losing something even more important. Our freedom to think for ourselves, our ability to say what we think without being afraid of being watched, and ultimately, our right to make our own choices.
Wow, that's a powerful thought. But I'm glad the article doesn't just leave us feeling hopeless.
Yeah.
It gives us some real things we can do to protect our privacy, both as individuals and as a society.
Yeah, the message isn't technology is bad. It's let's make sure technology helps us be more human.
And that's a great note to end on. To all our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the changing world of public and private spaces. We hope you found it helpful, thought-provoking, and maybe even inspiring. Remember, this conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a digital world that respects our privacy and our humanity.